All right, you ready to go?
Yep, I'm pulling up Viz so that I have the chat. I could always pull it up on my phone too, but whatever. But go ahead.
Welcome to another Sunday Superversive live stream. I am your host, Benjamin, and I'm here with Anthony Marquetta. Anthony, how are you doing today?
I had weird voices following me, but after I left Chincoteague, they're gone. How about you, Ben?
I am always echoed by the sounds of the ghosts of the forgotten and my own failures. I wouldn't mind it so much, except my failures are really annoying on a personal level. The ghosts, however, get to watch me in my full frontal, just enjoying myself and life. They scream and tell me it's unnatural and that I'm ugly, and if I would please cover up, their afterlife would be so much better. But I refuse to acknowledge the wishes of ghosts.
That was a perfectly normal answer and not unhinged at all. Good job. Uh,
It's so hard to be normal.
anyway,
Man, I can't imagine living in a world where everyone except for like 1% or 10% or whatever of the population has superpowers. That'd be really messed up. Like you'd have supervillains all over the place, maybe. Then you'd have heroes having to fight the villains. Man, I can't imagine a world like that.
holy crap, Ben! I just thought of a segue.
A segue, you say?
You're not gonna believe this, but what you just described is very similar to the world of Tiger and Bunny. And that show is very similar to My Hero Academia.
In what way, Anthony?
Uh, well, all right, I'm done with the spit. Uh,
Oh,
My Hero Academia. What did you think of the ending, Ben? Was
it
it good? Was it bad?
was it good? Was it bad? I thought we were gonna tease people for 2 hours before we give an answer, but I guess so that they
No,
watch the whole
to be
stream.
honest, I can't because it's going to be way too obvious what I think very quickly.
Oh,
Um,
you need to learn how to play the YouTube game, Anthony. The ending was fine. The ending was okay. The rumors of Deku just being a wage cuck is wrong. He is a teacher, spoilers, at UA, inspiring the next generations of heroes, which is the perfect possible ending for that character.
yeah, I like the ending. I thought it was good. Was it great? No. Was it good? Yes. That's all right. Show's over. Everybody can go home. Good job.
Da
No,
da
I'm
da
kidding.
da
Uh,
da 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 da
no. The reason I
da.
wanted to do this show, well, for one thing, it was inevitable we were going to do the show because My Hero Academia used to be, along with JoJo's, one of like the main topics of the channel in the year olden days.
I miss when we talked about
Until
JoJo all the time.
yeah, JoJo Land's just not much worth talking about there, to be honest with you.
No.
Uh, but as far as My Hero Academia goes, so it's really weird, like what's been going on with the story and everything, and the reaction around it. The reaction around, wow, Eri is in the chat, guys. The little girl who has a healing quirk and joined UA and became a pop star has joined our chat. Welcome, Eri.
Oh,
I think
jeez.
she was adopted by a random old lady, and like Coda became her brother or something.
Thank you for
You there,
joining
Ben?
us. Yeah, I'm still here. I just don't have anything funny to say.
Okay.
Like, sorry.
It's like no, I go. Not everything is a joke, Anthony. Uh, sometimes you got to be serious. Anyway, My Hero Academia. Uh, the comic book for children. Okay, so here's the thing about the ending of MHA. I've been thinking over like the one of the reasons that I wanted to make sure we talked about it before Sunday, where by the way, Father Gregory Pine will be joining us. Don't miss it.
I will once again be
Anyway,
teamed up by Catholic men.
yes. Uh, anyway, So Father Gregory Pine coming Saturday. Don't miss it. But anyway, one of the reasons I want to talk about it quickly is that there's been a lot of very strange discourse around the ending. People have hated this ending. It's really weird. There is a poll on Reddit currently where it's just, is the ending bad? And and the answer no is right, like, but not by a lot, which is strange to me. Because, to be honest, I think it's a pretty unhateable ending. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't do anything wild that would make you like turn on the ending. So if you were to ask me in advance without knowing any of the dialogue around it, do you think this ending will be divisive? I would have been like, of course not. Why would it be divisive? Like, it just gives you exactly what you'd expect.
Yep.
Right? Like, and yet people like exploded over this ending. You've seen some of the weirdest takes. It's an almost 50-50 split on if people even think it's okay or not. Where it's like, is the ending perfect? No. So my go-to for like a perfect shonen action series ending is Full Metal Alchemist, right? And I'll say just Alchemist because I'm referring specifically to the manga, but Brotherhood, not the 2003 show. So Full Metal Alchemist ends everything, like it really, really, really wraps every single plot thread up, right?
Mm-hmm.
It gets Ed together with Winry. It pairs off Al with May. We learn what happens to Hohenheim. We see who becomes emperor. We learn what happens with Mustang and Hawkeye continue to try and reform the government. Ed continues research on alchemy, right? Like all of this stuff. The villain's been defeated. It's wrapped up like pretty much perfectly. So that's my go-to. My Hero Academia was not able to get to that level of perfection, but very few series do, right? Like, I can't really think of any other. Maybe like I love the ending of JoJo Part 6, but it's such a wild and unique thing. It feels kind of unfair to compare anything to it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like it was just kind of its own thing. I mean, I love the ending of Steel Ball Run. Uh and I like most of the JoJo endings. I don't even hate the ending of Part 8, which I thought was the weakest. And I thought even that was fine. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I was satisfied with it. So JoJo's is pretty good at doing endings. Death Note had a poor second half, infamously, but a good final chapter. So, there's that. Uh, My Hero Academia, in my opinion, was hurt because the second half, I should say maybe like the final third of My Hero Academia is by consensus noticeably weaker than the rest of the manga. And I think people were carrying these negative feelings into the ending. I think people were hoping that the ending could do more than it was ever capable of doing. What do you make of this?
So they wanted more out of it than what it could perform.
Yeah, so My Hero Academia, first off, I don't think it ever got bad. If
Mm.
my overall thoughts on the series are that it's a classic that defined an era of shonen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Deservedly so. That its peaks were at least A tier and debatably S tier, and even at its worst, it was never really worse than C tier, and even then, never for that long.
Yes. Like there are
So
shows that went on for way too long that are better than the worst of sorry, shows on that are worse no, hold on. The worst of My Hero Academia is better than the best of a lot of shows that lasted for many years.
yeah, I'm thinking Fairy Tale off the top of my head as like an obvious one, but
Yeah, but Fairy
you know,
Tale had like a one piece fun quality of it. And it and the fairy
that's
tale
fair.
rotted what happened was is that it continued to escalate, and the escalations got more and more ridiculous to the point where it's like I don't have context for this. Please, please just go
Yes.
back to being fighting amongst the guilds and having tournaments and stuff. And they refused. But going back to what you're describing, there's also a problem of how do I want to put this? Like, what do people expect? Right? So, One Piece.
Mhm.
People went up to Chiri Oda and said, "Hey, Oda, please don't just make it the power of friendship. Nobody's going to like that. It's going to feel really bad. Please do not make the One Piece the friends we made along the way." And of course, he said, "No, I'm not going to do that." And it turns out the One Piece might just be the true history of the world, and is implied.
Ooh, that's not a bad one.
It's not. As well as, it's implied that there's going to be a ton of treasure there because that's where Roger left all his gold, maybe. At least that's what he says. But the goal of the One Piece is to get people to move out into the sea, not necessarily be an adventure manga endpoint, if you get me. It has a reason to exist diegetically inside the world. Um, then, excuse me, I forgot to do something. Uh,
Oh no.
no, we're fine, we're
Oh
fine, we're fine.
no. You're
Uh,
killing the stream, Ben. You're
no,
killing the
shut up,
stream.
shut up. Uh, I've said I'd leave notes for somebody to clip some stuff out of it. Uh, so with that diegetic insert into the world, you understand what the end of the stakes are. The world government has to be a part of the final battle. There's Blackbeard, who's a personal villain against Luffy, being his exact opposite in every way. And there's that massive treasure and the secrets that have been built up through nearly 30 years of manga. So then you take that, right? That is an amazing ending. And Oda has proven that he can handle it every single time. So then you go off to, uh, let's say, Fairy Tale, right? The escalations never went anywhere, partially because the overarching plot was too weak. It wasn't as much of a drive for certain characters as it should have been, namely the main character, Natsu. Even with his goals with the dragons and stuff like that, it never really affected the plot like people wanted. Uh, but then we look at My Hero Academia. What in the world could people have said was the ideal ending for My Hero Academia? The goal of My Hero Academia was for All for One to be defeated by One for All.
Right.
If anyone says any differently, they don't understand the manga. The goal of My Hero Academia was for the main villain to be defeated by the main hero. Now, along the way, there are friends, there are enemies, there's ups and downs, but that goal was met several chapters before the end of the manga. And it's important to understand that the climax of the story is not the last few pages and should never be the last few pages, but is rather the um, climactic fight between All for One and One for All. Once you get past that, all he's doing is setting up the chairs and putting up the tablecloths, wiping everything down, and making sure everything's in its slot. Like in the Iliad, the heroic moment of character is not some sort of like policy that Odysseus made in Ithaca or some sort of trade deal Priam made with the Hittites or whatever. The high points of the Iliad is the scenes of war between the major characters. Uh, not, you know, even for Odysseus, like the only reason his climax, quote unquote, is him going home is because uh, um, he has his own story just about him. Agamemnon was not at his greatest extent when he went home to Clytemnestra and got murdered in his bath, but rather when he was sacking Troy and having his feud with Achilles. Uh, to say anything different is to misunderstand the use of the character within the story. The reader, reading the Iliad, reading the Odyssey, and stuff like that, understands that these characters, or should understand, understands these characters don't stop existing uh, once they don't stop existing once the eyes of the story leave them. They have lives that they have to live after they return, or they're dead. The For example, with Achilles, his climax was not getting shot by an arrow by Paris. His climax was the slaying of Hector and his grieving with the king of Troy, Priam, over Hector's body.
Hmm.
There we go. So when people say, well, the climax was so weak, what are you talking about? They were fighting each other. He was sacrificing everything. One of them was going to die today, and if Shiggy wins, he's going to disintegrate the earth with his special power or something like that. Uh,
Hmm.
but, like, after the fight, when he's lost all his powers, when his mission is successfully completed, what does he do? Well, he goes home, he lives a life, he gets an education, gets a teaching degree, and then he teaches as UA, which is like what else can he do? Gain his powers back? They weren't his powers. They were someone else's powers loaned to him to fight this battle. What was he supposed to do? Like, I don't know. Like, I can't even think of anything because there's no really good explanation. To me, even him getting the suit of armor in the end by Bakugo doesn't really satisfy me as much as him living a virtuous life and inspiring generations of heroes by his good work and good teaching. Because he's the greatest hero of his age, he has won his laurels. Like, there's no other height he can achieve.
Yep. Yeah, I get what you're saying. So here's the thing. I think that there was a lot of disappointment about the whole second half of MHA that I think was somewhat warranted. What I mean
So hold
is
on,
this.
define the second half if you don't mind.
I should probably it's probably not a full half of the story. Like I guess it's probably closer to the final third. I would say people generally started to get a little uh going with like the Dark Deku arc onward. So this is past the war arc. Uh the war arc was amazing, right? I think everybody at the time, I remember reading it, it was absolute peak My Hero Academia. Uh so this is where you get things like Shigaraki's Awakening, which is one of the best chapters in the entire series. Probably one of the best actors in a shonen manga in like the past 10 years. Right? Like seriously, one of my favorite things I've ever seen was Shigaraki's Awakening
Yeah.
chapter. You also get things like the Dabi reveal, which is one of the best chapters in the whole manga. Uh, you get some of these amazing fight scenes, right? Some of the best fight scenes where Tokiyami saves Hawks, right? Like all of these hype moments are happening. Now, there is some weirdness at the end of the war arc where it's like it kind of ends abruptly because it's not the climax. So he couldn't really pay off everything. You know what I mean? Uh,
Yep.
like Mirio shows up, and that's like probably one reveal too many, right? Uh, okay, fine, fair. Gran Torino doesn't die. This is really weird, and everybody agrees. Like, seriously, why did Gran Torino survive? He was like frigging impaled through the side. Uh, he had absolutely no business surviving. Like, okay, fine, fair. And then it just sort of peters off without a real resolution, and there wasn't really any other way to do it but that. I do remember that even then, at the time, there was this weird thing where people were going, "Oh, there weren't enough stakes from the war arc," and then they revealed that like all of the prisons in Japan had been broken open and criminals had been released into the streets, and Gigantomachia had like destroyed the city or something, and then everybody was just kind of like, "Oh, never mind." Uh, yeah, it's a lot of stakes. Uh, some big juicy steaks right there. But yeah, like that was, I think, the first moment people's like, huh, that's a little weird. I think what happened is that people were expecting Deku to be mastering his power over the course of his school years, right? Um, I'm not sure if Horikoshi ever intended this or not. It's hard to say. However, I do agree that the story would have been better for this. It also just lacks the forward planning of a true masterpiece like, say, One Piece. Like, here's what I mean.
Yeah.
Uh, and to be clear, this is, if any, like, this is a positive comparison to One Piece more than a negative to My Hero Academia. But, like, Stars and Stripes, her fight, heavily criticized by fans of the manga, and I think rightfully so.
Mm.
However, I think the fight itself was fine. I don't agree with some of the criticisms, like, oh, Shigaraki survived by digging a hole. Well, yeah, he shielded himself from a massive explosion by getting far away from it, by going underground. Like, I don't know what you wanted him to do. Uh, right? Like,
Yeah.
that was actually, I actually thought that was a clever use of Shigaraki's powers. You know,
Yeah.
there was literally no other direction for him to go but down, so he decayed the earth to escape the blast. Like, that's a smart idea. But anyway, I didn't really have a problem with the fight itself. But Stars and Stripes is introduced with this incredibly broken quirk as this massive world-beating threat, and we have literally never heard her mentioned once until she is introduced in this arc.
She wasn't
Can
in
you
one of the
imagine?
side mangas?
Nope.
Oh.
Never ever mentioned. And even if she was, that's cheating. That's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
a good
yeah, yeah. I'm
excuse.
not gonna say it's great, but it's like, you know.
I'm pretty sure she was never mentioned. Now,
Mm,
can you imagine if the number one American hero had not even appeared, but been mentioned in the story frequently as like, oh, the incredible Stars and Stripes, and she was always in the background as like maybe there are some people who say she's as good as All Might, but the Japanese don't believe it, something like that, right?
yeah.
Uh, and then she shows up. Instead of it coming out of nowhere, you could generate a massive amount of hype from this. But Horikoshi just kind of does it, right? He's just like, yeah, she's here and she's amazing, and you're gonna figure it out, right? Uh, okay. So the fight itself is fine, but then after Shigaraki kills her and wins the fight, the quirk, then all they do with this entire plot point is have her quirk like delay him for a bit, which they didn't even need to do, right? Like, you could just say, oh, he needed that extra time to be ready. You could have just cut this fight entirely from the story and nothing would have changed. And it's not like this was a fight that fans were expecting. Again, Horikoshi inserted it randomly. So this is the sort of thing that I mean.
Mm,
And there's also the fact that like you're sort of expecting Deku to train and grow and build his powers. And he kind of gets all of these powers and we almost skip the training section. Literally the
yeah.
vestiges are in Deku's head just kind of telling him how to use it. Now, these are all real criticisms that I think are fair, right?
Right.
However, do I think that they are fatal to the manga? No, I don't. I think that thematically it remains on point. I actually really, really liked the Lady Nagant fight,
Oh
which was in the
yeah.
Dark Deku arc. I thought that was one of the better fights in the manga, actually, because
I agree.
Horikoshi normally is very good at emotional stakes, but not great at choreography. But I thought it was actually like a very cleverly choreographed fight with a lot of strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, which was really cool to see. It's like not normal for it. But then you get to the final fight, and again, the final fight is not bad per se, but the casing is something is really off about the casing. The big
Hmm.
thing is the infamous fake out death with Bakugo, where
Yeah.
like literally nobody thought Bakugo was dead. I remember when it happened, everybody was actually like really angry about it because they're like, "Come on, we know you're not killing Bakugo. Like, did you have to do it like this?" And he doesn't confirm, and then he has Bakugo survive in like the stupidest possible way, uh, where Ed Shot like goes into his bloodstream, and I don't know, uh,
He
ties her.
sews his heart
Yeah,
back together.
yeah, it's really stupid. And then Bakugo's quirk explodes in his heart, and that restarts it. And
Like
it's like, bro, why did you even do this? Like,
so
you
like
could have just not killed him.
like there's a pretty good running gag with Bakugo that he's an absolute edge lord. Like, if he
Yeah,
was a Dark Lord of the Sith or something, he'd show up on his Star Destroyer that's decorated with spikes and My Chemical Romance lyrics, and like sitting there, he'd be like sitting in space because he's just that cool, shooting down X-wings with Sith Force lightning, blah blah blah, like while slow heavy metal music keeps playing, um has to
yep.
fight his dad. uh
I mean, he'd be Darth Vader because Darth Vader is already an edge.
yeah, but he'd
Like,
like Darth Vader is the most dramatic a character can be without spoiling things in a world as serious as Star Wars, as weird as it is to say that Star Wars is a
yes,
serious world. But Bakugo is like, he'd like, I don't know. Like, you have to understand, like, there's no limits to this guy. He thinks he can just like be like the super edge lord and everyone will take him seriously when people clearly don't take him seriously until they realize he's actually very good at his job. Except for the public relations part. Like, there's an inside joke there that of course he can restart his own heart with his own quirk, even though the idea that his sweat is somehow inside his heart or able to, you know, beat his chest or whatever in that manner is
yes.
patently ridiculous. Absolutely nonsensical. But because of his edge lordness, like there's a meta joke there. The problem is that My Hero Academia's humor and when they have jokes and stuff like that are actually way more broad and slapstick than this edge lord restarting his own heart just because he's just that dedicated to fighting the villains, who have him killed dead to rights, etc., etc. Like, yeah, there's a joke there. It's actually decently funny. The problem is that he's not set up for it as well as Horikoshi thinks he is. Like, it's a difference between recognizing a joke and thinking it's funny. Like, there was a comedian who showed up and he was making some jokes about Jewish people. Say goodbye to monetization. And someone goes up and he's like, "Oh, Jews aren't going to replace your jobs. Why would we want those stinky jobs anyway?" And someone brings up Jews in media, and he goes, "How dare you? How dare you?" And he has this guy kicked out. It's kind of like that. Like there's jokes to be made, but the problem is that the audience wasn't prepped for it and had different expectations than what the author thought was appropriate for, or editor, because this is, the editor has a lot of power in Shonen Jump, uh, has for it. So
Yes.
when he tells a joke, his audience may not be able to understand the joke, or take the joke more seriously than the guy intends. Now, the comedian I was talking about should have laughed and he said, "Oh, you'll never work in this town again for saying that. How dare you lie about, these innocent people." Like he can make that kind of joke. He's a comedian. You're supposed to be able to make jokes. But when it comes to story, if you've mishandled the humor, you can't change the humor on the fly. You have to gradually build it up. By way of another example, if I were to add comedy routines in Pinkerton's Ghosts, the humor I would have to use would actually be fairly subtle, because Pinkerton's Ghost is a horror story. So even though there are scenes that are, I'm told, very funny and stuff like that, some of which unintentional, uh, I won't go out of my way to create a
Never
slap.
admit it, Ben.
No, uh, I
It's
would.
always intentional.
It's always intentional. You're right. Uh, I would never like create something slapstick or deliberately write something humorous with an intention to get a laugh because of several reasons. It's going to sound forced. It's going to sound terrible. Some of these characters can't joke to save their lives. And lastly, the audience is not looking for humor in a relatively serious horror story.
Yep. Yeah, it was an odd. There was a lot of reasons it was odd. Nobody believed he was dead. The pacing was weird. It was kind of unusual. The flip side, though, is like I don't think that the final arc was bad. Right? Like I
Right.
thought they have the really weird scene where Mirio like Moon. It was debated actually if this was a good scene or not. I am in the camp. It was not a good scene. I didn't like it. Mirio moons all for one to distract him for a moment so Deku can get through. Uh, I did not like the scene. I was like, no, nope. Mirio, as much as he can be amusing, is
Mm,
supposed to be a serious character. We want everybody contributing, and the best he can do is a momentary distraction by mooning him. It's dumb. I don't like it.
yep.
Uh, like it did not really make me laugh. There were some people who loved it, right? Like they thought it was hilarious.
Right.
Not me.
Like there, there,
So,
there are things to joke about, and having uh, like a moment where it's how do I want to put it? Um, like that kind of slapstick does work in superhero comics. The problem is that Mirio, while he is a comedy character, tends to get very serious when he's fighting villains. So when he's at
yep.
UA, yes, he's very humorous. He's a funny guy. He's just showing up out of nowhere and he sticks his little face out and he's like, "Hey, how's it going? Don't step on me."
Mhm.
Or something like that. But then when he fights a villain, it's like all the jokes go away, and he fights very seriously. That's the whole point of the drama with Overhaul. So it's like, yeah, sure, there are elements of comedy within My Hero Academia, but the villain fights are treated very seriously. And so that rule was broken in the case of some of the slapstick moments and in the case of Bakugo restarting his own heart with his quirk. Yes, the edge lord joke is kind of funny sometimes, but the dramatic stakes would have been better suited killing Bakugo.
I don't know. I disagree. I don't think Bakugo should have died. Uh, I just think they shouldn't have faked his death.
You know what? I'll accept that. That's fine.
With that said, yeah, and for the record, by the way, the chapter where Mirio loses his powers is, in my opinion, the best. It's debatable for because there are other great chapters, like I mentioned, Shigaraki's Awakening. It's probably my favorite chapter in the entire manga. Like, it actually makes me tear up every time I read it. Like, it's
Mm,
incredibly well done. It's a really, really moving chapter. That's when Mirio faces down Overhaul, who is one of
yeah.
the best villains, by the way, in the entire manga. It's intense. It's like cinematically done. Uh, the stakes are incredibly high. It has that superhero feel of people doing, impossible things that shouldn't be able to be done by humans, but It's all really, really moving. The anime butchered it. I hated the anime adaptation of the scene so much. Just so much.
I never
But
watched the anime, and I'm happier for it.
seasons 1 through 3 of the anime are superb.
Oh yeah.
Truly like superb. Season 4, the Endeavor fight was great. That's the nicest thing I could say. Uh,
Sure.
Season 4 had a great fight scene. At one point, yeah, like. But going back to the ending of My Hero Academia and like the story as a whole, overall though, I think like it did play off. Like the ending had some great chapters in it. For example, there was a debate, a smaller and less intense debate in the fandom over whether the fight where All Might had like the Iron Man suit, they call it the Iron Might fight, with All
Mm.
for One was good or not. I loved it. I thought it was great. Like I loved it conceptually. I loved how it played out. I just thought it was fantastic. Right?
Right.
Really, really cool fight. Thematically appropriate. Great ending. Right?
Hmm.
Thought everything about it was great. So that was one thing that like that was a really good part of the ending. It gave All Might something to do. He bowed out of the story in a really cool way, but it played off his character arc, which was about him accepting that he didn't necessarily have to be a martyr for the cause, right? That he could still inspire people without dying, but it's all about how All Might is powered by the collective the his suit is inspired by the powers of his students, right? So All Might is collectively surviving that fight by the people being driven by the next generation who he has mentored. And even when he is about to die, the reason that he doesn't die and All for One is defeated is that his two best students work together, who he has helped, by the way, repair their relationship, have worked together in order to rescue him from All for One and then eventually kill All for One. By the way, shout out to Bakugo for not even hesitating at shooting a baby. Just straight up nukes a baby.
Yeah, good man.
Good man.
Not that we're
Uh,
anti-natalist here, but it was a Hitler baby, and those have special
yeah,
rules.
Bakugo would have killed baby Hitler. Wouldn't even have hesitated.
Yep.
Anyway, uh, the moral judgment's a little different, but you get the idea. Anyway, uh, and I thought that Deku's final, yes, I thought Deku's final fight with Shigaraki was good. I thought Ochako's fight with Toga was good. Like these are all solid farewells to the character.
I've seen a lot
There
of
were
people
things,
complain about the Toga fight.
yeah, they're wrong. It was a good fight with a good
Oh
ending.
yeah, I'm more on your side than not, but it's I don't know. It's like seeing what people are complaining about uh, is how do I want to put it? Not eye opening.
Okay, so
It's
let me
like
give the real criticism of the Toga fight, but the thing is, this isn't a criticism of the final arc. It's a criticism of kind of Toga as a character, which
hmm.
is that there is no way that Toga should be able to compete with these heavyweights with
Oh
her
yeah.
quirk. Her quirk is very good for espionage, right? It's
Yep.
very good. Like when she was pretending to be various students and you didn't know if one of them was Toga or a student, all of that, great. Perfect use of the character, right?
Hmm.
Toga being able to take on Ochako, whose quirk is actually like really broken, which I'm not sure if My Hero Academia ever figured that out, but her quirk
If
is
they
like
did not.
incredibly strong. I
Yeah.
don't think it really ever did. But like if you think about it for like 2 seconds, her quirk is incredibly broken, right?
Yep.
Like turning off reversing gravity is so like you can just imagine her like throwing a house, having it accelerate, then turning off her quirk and just like leveling a mountain with it, right?
Yeah.
Like
There's a lot of ridiculous stuff that you can do with gravity. In other series, a character with Ochoko's powers would have been an S tier character or, something similar
yeah, on the power scale,
on the
right?
power scale.
Um So I get it. Uh, with that, so Toga really should not have been able to go one on one with Ochako for as long as she did, or
Yeah.
be that much of a threat. Like she should have, and I think Horikoshi used her wrong, because she absolutely is a major threat in the correct role,
Yeah.
but treating her as if she has like she's on the same power level as like I don't know Shigaraki, is kind of ridiculous.
Right.
When Shigaraki can literally disintegrate mountains, you know.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
with that said,
yeah.
this has already been like an established thing. Like you're supposed to accept by the time you reach this point of the story that yes, we are supposed to take Toga that seriously. Uh, and and given that setup, I think the fight was good with a good ending. Right? Like
Sure.
Toga
Yeah.
sacrifices herself to save Ochako because Ochako has proven to Toga that she is willing to hear her out, right? Like she's treating Toga like a real person and not a freak, even as she's trying to stop her from hurting people. She's
Yeah.
not willing to just, she is still taking her feelings seriously,
Yeah.
right? And this impresses Toga enough that she sacrifices her life to save Ochako. Good ending to Toga's character. Good wrap up to her character arc. I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
Uh, Shigaraki as well. Shigaraki, there was a major criticism that people gave that Shigaraki, like, I'm trying to think of how to put it, that they revealed that All for One orchestrated every event in Shigaraki's life. He never made any decisions for himself. On one hand, I get why people were disappointed in this.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I understand Horikoshi's point, and I think it goes to what All for One as a character represented. All for One was meant to represent more than just a villain behind everything. He was meant to represent all of the failings of society kind of bound up together in one, right?
Would you describe him
So
like a cancer?
a little bit. It's more like all of the so throughout the series, we're seeing all of the issues with Hero Society,
Mm.
right? That literally they're trying and that they try to cover up to make it seem like things are better than they are, and they're able to get away with this for so long because All Might is patching up the holes, right?
Yes.
But now All Might's retired, so they can't get away with that anymore. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Now you've reached this point of the story, and you go, well, Shigaraki makes his own choices, and All for One reveals that no, he engineered everything. Well, the
Right.
way I would describe it is that if you see All for One as a person who is a villain, like it doesn't. I agree that that's disappointing, but if you recognize All for One as the representation of society's problems, like combined into one person, because that's what he does. The reason he gains power is that he manipulates all of the issues that Hero Society has. He works with those issues and works in those cracks. It's how he gets the League of Villains together. It's how he manipulates them. It's how he maintains his power by working in those cracks in Hero Society. So
Mm-hmm.
then it makes sense to say Shigaraki was not created by himself, just making those choices. Like, literally, society made him that way. And I know that this is sometimes a cop out, but I think it's important here to think of it like that because the whole point is it's not to absolve Shigaraki of blame. That's not the point. The
Mm-hmm.
point is to say that Shigaraki didn't have to be this way, right?
Didn't have to be this way. Sorry.
I've never heard that song. But
Oh,
seriously though, like yeah,
yes.
I'll have to listen to it later maybe. Anyway, like Shigaraki, like seriously though, that's like the
Mm-hmm.
point of this whole reveal is that if somebody had like the only reason All for One is able to do anything is because of the failures in society, right?
Yes.
He's able to manipulate the fact that nobody reached out a hand to help him to step in and do it.
And
If society had not go ahead.
and even more than that, he encouraged other people's bad habits. He befriended Shigaraki's father. My son, I'm really worried about him. you need to be more strict. Are you sure? Absolutely. Spare the rod, spoil the child, as they say. And he's like, I guess that'll work, as they're drinking together or something. He interacts with people, makes sure that, various characters are stressed or not, so that the bad reaction he wants gets ingrained deeper and deeper into Shigaraki. He's absolutely right. The reason why I like the cancer, Anthony's absolutely right. The reason why I like it as a cancer metaphor is because it's a bad idea bound up in the knot of society, and nobody,
Hmm.
goes out of their way to fix it. In other words, not only is there might be a failure of heroes to fight the League of Villains, there's a failure of other people to give each other advice that is good rather than advice that degrades what's there. In other words, nobody's countering um, All for One's terrible advice to Shiggy's father because
Yep.
who knows why, who cares why, but nobody's doing it. Maybe they think it's
Because
not their
society
business.
itself is broken in a very big way.
Yeah,
Like the point. So I guess what I'm saying is the point of that scene. If you look at it as, oh, we've gotten rid of all of Shiggy's agency and taken away all blame from what he did. Yes, it would be disappointing if read in that way,
mm-hmm.
right? However, I don't look at it. I don't think that's the point that Horikoshi was making.
Right.
I think the point he was making is Shigaraki did not have to turn out this way. He wasn't an inherently evil person who was always going to be the sort of man who would try and just burn the world, right? He
Right.
was made this way by the choices, by the failures of others who didn't reach out a hand to help him when he was a child who couldn't do any better, right?
Yes.
That's the point of all of this. And Deku, once again, by the way, the reason I'm going through this as well is because one of the criticisms I saw of the final chapter, and this was one of the worst, and I want to really go through this, is that the League of Villains ideology was never proven wrong by the heroes. That in fact they failed because they were forced to kill most of the League of Villains to have saved them. This is incredibly wrong. That's why I made the point of emphasizing that Toka, in fact, is not even killed. She sacrifices her life to save Ochako, right? Because Ochako proves her point of view wrong. She proves to Ochako that there are people out there who are willing to listen to people like her, right? Who are willing to reach out a
Right.
hand and to say, yes, I will hear your point of view, right? And Shigaraki is proven wrong in that even though Deku fails to save his life, right?
Right.
He is not able to save him physically, and there was really no way for him to do that, right? Which
No.
Deku knew, because he would have been executed if he had survived, and deservedly so.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think All Might and Deku kind of admit this later, right? Like they have a
Yeah.
conversation about it. But he saves Shigaraki in the sense of Deku goes in to reach out a hand to him and makes it clear to Shigaraki that things are going to be different in the future. That he is going to work to make sure that people reach out a hand to future Shigarakis. And in case you didn't get it, if it was too subtle for you, this literally happens in the next couple of chapters with a small crying child who's in an incredibly similar situation to Shigaraki. The same old lady who let Shigaraki, who walked by Shigaraki when she saw him in the street, reaches out her hand to that child. And in the final chapter of the story, he is one of Deku's students at UA.
Oh,
Right?
really?
Like, yep,
I missed
that
that.
would be Dai, I believe. Like, in case it was too subtle for you, like they make the point that Shigaraki was absolutely, his point of view was wrong. That basically their argument is that society is not worth saving, right? Like it's not worth saving, it just needs to be burned down. Deku is saying, no, we can change. This is the same argument, by the way, that's made to Stain, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
because Stain is saying the heroes need to be killed off and we only have the pure ones left. And Deku was saying no, because we can change, right? That's the difference between the two. And Ida is the example of this in that arc. Ida changes, right? He has a point of view where he's originally going after Stain out of vengeance, but in seeing Deku act selflessly, Ida changes, right?
By
Now,
the way, yeah, he's
there are other criticisms as well, and I know that you have to leave not long after 8, so I'll try to go quick. I do want to respond to them, though, because I've seen them a lot. People said that Deku didn't grow or change as a character.
We're fine, by the way, on time. Don't worry too much about it, okay? I've already
Okay,
eaten
no
today.
problem. Yep. So, Deku, I've heard people say that Deku doesn't change much as a character, that, like, he doesn't have a character arc. I think this is very wrong, right? Like, one of the big issues with Deku as a character is, or with this argument, sorry, about Deku as a character, is it misunderstands what the character arc even was. There was a 4chan post that went viral that made this horrible argument that said that Deku's issue was actually that he didn't really try things himself. People had to push him into things, right? And the argument made was Deku wasn't even going to be a hero until All Might pushed him into it. And then instead of trying to be a hero again later without a quirk, like training for it, All Might had to literally give him a suit. And that he's basically the same person at the beginning and end of the series. This is really, really bad. Actually, it sounds good until you think about it. Right? But it's not a good argument. So the first problem is people forget chapter 1 of My Hero Academia. If you reread the chapter, you'll notice that Deku, in fact, was going to apply to UA quirkless. Like, that was his goal. That was his plan. Then he meets All Might, and he only changes his mind on this after All Might, the greatest hero of all time, literally tells him directly, don't do it. It's a bad idea. Right? Up until that point, Deku was going to try and do it quirkless. So there's really, like, that's just not one of Deku's character flaws. Like, he has character flaws. That's just not it. You know? So it was never a thing with Deku.
I've got quirked up white boy memes stuck in my head.
Nice. I'm gonna keep going.
He's a quirkless white boy, doing his best to break it down sexual style.
That's awful, and I love it. Anyway, so the second thing too is that Deku did have a character arc. He had a very clear character arc that, once again, Horikoshi, people accuse him of being somewhat ambiguous in the chapter, and we'll get to what I think are the legitimate criticisms later. But, like, this is not something he was ambiguous about. Deku's character arc is very clear, and Deku says what it is multiple times in the story. He believed he had to be the All Might, that his responsibility was that he was going to take over for All Might and be the new symbol of peace, and that all of society rested on his, right? The future of society was going to have to rest on his shoulders. That is literally the point of the Dark Deku arc, right? Where, by the way, and this is an aside, one thing that I find really funny about My Hero Academia, unintentionally, and not in a bad way, just like it amuses me, is that a lot of the times in these sorts of stories, when you get heroes who, like, go off and work on their own, they become, like, vigilantes and are working on the wrong side of the law. But in fact, in My Hero Academia, never at any point of the story does Deku ever break the law.
Yeah.
Like, even in the Dark Deku arc, he is a vigilante, but he has his hero license. He's allowed to do hero work. He's actually
really
working.
Vigilante. Like, he's just
right,
not
he's
following
working with
orders.
the government. Yeah, in fact, he's actually working with the government. Like, All Might and the government are working together, giving him orders. So he does technically drop out of school, but he's given explicit permission by the government to do this.
And it wasn't even that school was around anymore. Like, the world is falling apart.
They weren't even having regular classes.
He's not a vigilante.
Yeah, I just find it kind of funny that, like, a lot of the times in these sorts of stories, you know, they go like, we're gonna work, you know, the law has failed us, so we're gonna work against the law, but that actually technically never does happen with Deku. Like, never at any point does he ever do anything against the law at any point of the story. Even his hero work, like he has a license. He is
Right.
allowed to do it. It's just kind of amusing to me, but that's neither here nor there. The point is that Deku's arc was that he thought that all of society had to be on his shoulders. This is the point of the Dark Deku arc. The whole point of this arc was that this sort of arrangement could not work, right?
Right.
He was going to fail. It was too much pressure, which is why his friends reach out and help him. And then Ochako makes a speech to the crowd and tells them that they can't just count on the heroes to do everything. They need to step up as well. And by the end of the story, this is what we see happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Deku does have a character arc. The character arc is that he needs to realize that everything can't just fall on his shoulders. He needs to spread the load, and that everybody needs to work together if they want to create a better future. And Horikoshi hammers this home in so many ways. Like, it's very not subtle.
Right.
So this idea that Deku just had no arc is bizarre. And anyway, even if he did have an arc, his problem was never that, like, he didn't try anything without a push. Like, that was just made up. It's just because, like, you forgot what happened in the first chapter. Right?
Yeah.
But, yeah, so that's one thing. But here's where I think there's some fair criticisms. Like, Merg Magalramaxis, hi, if you're still there. If you're not, maybe you'll hear this later. Mentions that a good chunk of the guys are serial shippers that are pissed we didn't get the obvious ship confirmation. I think that there's some fairness to that criticism. You know, like, I understand that in shonen adventure stories, you don't need to, not all of, there often isn't shipping or, like, there isn't explicit confirmation of romance.
Mm-hmm.
It's certainly not unique to My Hero Academia. With that said, with an 8-year time jump and so many potential romances set up, the fact that we got literally no romances confirmed, even when Deku and Ochako get a specific chapter to themselves, right,
Yeah.
just before the ending, does feel a little weird. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, I guess they're all just single.
Right. Or they somebody pointed out that with the splash page with all of them together, that if you look at how Bakugo's shoulder is put and you know how long his arms are, his hand is basically grabbing Ochako's butt. And I can't unsee it. Now,
I sort of get it, but I'm looking at the splash page right now, and to be fair, the way that Bakugo propels himself forward is by shooting through his hands.
yes.
I think his hand is just behind him and blocked by Ochako,
No,
and he's shooting himself forward.
you're right, but it's like one of those things where, you know, just a turn of the wrist and it gets worse than you think.
It's pretty fun.
But
It's pretty funny, but I don't
it
think
is.
there's much to it.
It's no, with
Also, the fact that Mineta is a hero is a war crime, and he should be dead. I hate him. I hate Mineta so much. One of my least favorite characters in a work that I actually enjoy ever. Like, there's a lot of hateable characters, like the Shield Hero in Rising of the Shield Hero, but I don't like Rise of the Shield Hero. Mineta is in a story that I actually like, which makes it even weirder that I hate him so much.
Well, it's yeah, no, I understand that, but it's sorry. Uh I find your hatred
all
of
that
him
seriously?
amusing. Was that?
Yeah. You shouldn't take it all that seriously. Like, I appreciate when Horikoshi talks about it. It's always pretty funny because it's obvious that Horikoshi knows that everybody hates Mineta because he
Everybody
always
hates
ranks
Mineta.
like because he always ranks like near the bottom of every popularity poll. And Horikoshi has like made statements on it before where he's just kind of like, I'm always kind of sad that people dislike Mineta because he goes, I think he's funny. And He's just like, and I think he goes, I kind of base Mineta on me. Like, he's kind of pervy and a little bit of a cast. And he goes, and so was I when I was in high school. It's like, okay, that's actually kind of funny. In that case,
Right.
like, I appreciate that Horikoshi is making fun of himself.
Right.
In that sense, like. With that said, I still just really, really do not like the character. A lot of the jokes he makes are like so weird and creepy that I'm like, no. Like when he goes to Eri, like, oh, you'll be interesting in 10 years. It's like, why would you say that to her? That's so creepy. She's like 8. It's like,
Yeah.
shut up. Shut up.
Yeah.
Uh, Even if you didn't like, I guess technically it's not pedophilia, but he's also telling the little girl this. It's like, don't
Yeah,
tell
but he
her
gets
that. Oh my god,
punished. He gets punished by everyone pretty regularly.
he does, and that's true. Uh, I do remember in one of the few good jokes that Mother's Basement made. He said all of the future heroes and Mineta are going to work forward to be better people or something like that.
Yes.
He's like, and everybody needs to learn to be, to work together in society. And Mineta also needs to learn not to be a scumbag. And I'm like, yeah, actually, that was pretty funny. Uh,
Yeah. The, to get off Mineta, the I think with so the main complaint. Let's focus in on the real main complaint here. Is that people looked at Deku being a teacher at UA,
mhm.
and then they made it sound like he was working some wage cut job, doing nothing except rotting and waiting to die and earning some money and living, a bland, adventureless life. When you read the chapter, it's very clear that he's working as a teacher in UA and inspiring the next generation. When it comes down to that sort of thing, how would you respond to the people complaining directly about his supposed wage cocking?
Well, for one thing, it's not true.
I mean, yeah,
Like,
it's not true, but like it's one of those things. Like, do you just tell them to screw off? You're lying. It's. Hmm.
so a lot of this, I think, first off, like there, I have heard, though I can't confirm, and haven't been interested enough to double check this,
Right.
that the story was not badly received in Japan at all. Right,
Right.
that they were much more positive. And I think that goes to the way that teachers are looked at in Japan. There's a lot more respect for the profession, and
Right.
probably deservedly so. Uh,
Well, I understand that they
you
can
know,
actually do things like discipline their students and inspire them to be better wage cucks in a society that actually values wage cucks.
yes. So there's sadly, this is all true. Uh, But this is so teachers are a much more respected profession in Japan, and I think that was part of it. But there's just a weirdness to like the reactions around the ending that people are so upset at Deku just not living his dream for 8 years. And I'm like, okay, so number one, 8 years isn't that long. Like, I understand that these are all children, so 8 years must seem very long to them,
Hmm.
right? Like, we're like the oldest of the demographic reading the manga. And that's because, in a large way, we did kind of grow up with it. At the very least,
I did,
I
yeah.
was, yeah, I would have been a teenager when it came out, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so I was not quite, probably slightly older than the official demographic, but only slightly.
I
So it
mean,
makes
I
some
was
sense that I would
well
have been
into
reading it.
being an adult when it came out. But at the same time, it's like it's part of the Shonen Jump experience. Um, excuse me.
Yep.
Uh, to there have been people who have lived, grown up, and died of legitimate old age during the period that Shonen Jump has existed. To call it any less than one of Japan's major cultural icons is doing it a disservice. So it's like I've mentioned before, One Piece is about 30 years old. So it's like I understand what you're saying about demographics, but it's like no, it's like reading fairy tales as an adult. C.S. Lewis would have some harsh words for anybody who criticizes it. Are you there? Still there, Anthony? I heard a gulp. Anyway, well, Anthony's.
I told.
Okay. Well, we're just gonna chat while Anthony's distracted. Uh, when it comes to length and distances of time, it really doesn't help people who say this is juvenile, this is not, because it destroys a great deal of any potential seriousness these things can have. Uh, and what I mean is, when you're reading a work, you have to take your own sort of ideas out of it, right? This is the author's work. We don't believe in death of the author here. There is the working of the spirit to drive an author to greater heights, but that doesn't always happen in the way that people expect. Um, with My Hero Academia, the author had an unenviable position in that he had to satisfy a very large and broad user base, and a reader base that was foreign to what he was talking about. Uh, the Americans, and I believe the Americans are the ones who are the largest complainers about the ending. Um, and I'm very pro-American, so you have to understand this hurts me too. Uh,
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Anyway.
Yeah. Discord like exploded on me on the computer, so I don't know what just happened. So I'm communicating via phone.
Okay.
But that doesn't all.
I'll finish up what I was saying. So
The American.
I can hear myself on your thing, Anthony.
That's because Discord suddenly decided to pop up, randomly speak 2 words, then die again. Everything's collapsing.
Maybe mute the computer.
Reality is breaking apart.
Reality
is breaking apart. Keep going.
All right. So he has to help out these following demographics. The core demographics are shown in Jump: the teens, kids, etc. That sort of youth demographic. He has to please, and that's the core group, especially young boys. The secondary group is, young men who are adults, but not necessarily, middle-aged or old men. And then, of course, there's girls, and then there's younger women who also grew up in it and still follow it for things like that Rakugo comic and cutesy other comics that pop up every now and then, and One Piece. Everyone is reading One Piece, so you are always going to have a demographic in there. So ignoring all these side demographics for the main demographic, and that's just in the Japanese society. In the Japanese society, to solve for the young kids, what would be the best possible ending? And it's like I said earlier, Deku becomes an authority figure for the next generations to come, a beacon of hope and a shining symbol for everything. The rest of them, they have the satisfaction of the fights and the well-written ending and all this other stuff. But if you look over the sea to America, you see that there's actually a separation of demographics. While there, is the online the youth demographic that they always go for, in reality, American anime and stuff like that is primarily consumed by people who are terminally online and have a louder voice than what their reach is. So it's like when a cancel mob comes for you. What's your answer? Your answer isn't to freak out and go, oh no, I'm so sorry. The answer is, of course, to ignore them, collect libel and slander, and if it is in your best interest, go after them legally. You hunker down, wait for the storm to blow over, and then you fight back. You know, these people are not mentally sane. These people are crazy, in fact. They live in their mother's basements more than not, and if they don't, it's because they did some weird sexual thing and had to be kicked out for the good of the family. Goodness gracious me, that mother was probably not much of a parent to begin with. You know, so you have, and they're very loud online. So you have a malcontent demographic that even though they are very loud, their actual outlay of merch and money is much less than even a kid who just spends his pocket money on Shonen Jump every week. And so what you
Yeah.
have is sort of a separation between what the core audience has as an expectation and what the um, and what the internet is talking about. So in reality, even though the internet is blowing up and going crazy over this or that, you know, a Deku cucked out or whatever, in reality, the Japanese demographic, from what we can tell, is mostly fine. Nobody really pays attention to the desires and um, desires and pull of degenerates when you have a multi-billion series like My Hero Academia. They don't have to care. They're selling like gangbusters in their own country. So even though people are complaining about it, it doesn't really mean anything. It ended fine. It ended in the way that it was supposed to do. The other ending that could have been satisfying is that Deku gets to keep a moiety of his power, and he gets to build it up again as one for all.
Yeah,
But the
that could have
thing
been
is,
fine.
that could have been fine. But the thing is that removes the character impulse that all one for all has been set up. In other words, they would have to counteract um, what the original one for all was trying to do for his brother, and it would kind of weaken the sacrifice he made to kill one for all for one. Uh, so like I dig it. There was one other possibility. However, that wouldn't actually move Deku forward in any meaningful way. He'd still be the same person that he was when he started the series, but also had just gotten All Might's power. So, in other words, having him as a normal person, as he was in the beginning, but instead of being hero, he is actively training the next generation of heroes from a position of respect and honor. Is so much better than an ending where he has nothing. You know, he just is what he was before the fight, and now he is as he is after the fight, as if nothing happened to him character-wise.
Yeah, so let me ask you this question. I'll give my thoughts on it. Um, what do you think of Deku getting the suit at the end from his friend? So here is my thought on this whole thing.
Right.
Uh, so first off, that was one thing where people are like, "Oh man, Deku became a loser." Like, no, he became a teacher at the most prestigious hero school in the country,
Right.
teaching heroism,
We
and
can't
he was
repeat this enough.
yes, and he was a living legend who whose feats were so insane that less than a decade later, people are not even sure if they actually happened because of how remarkable they were. Right? Like that's how much his feats have gone into legend. He is recognized on site by children who would have been too young to see the original fight. right?
Yep.
Like they look at him, they go, "Oh my God, like you're Deku, you're the Deku," right? Like this is not a wage cuck or a loser, right?
Yes.
Uh, I think part of it is, and I'll get to my point about the suit in a moment. I think that part of it is that people like are creating this weird dichotomy where it's like you are either uh living out your dream or you are a total failure in life, right?
Right.
And what's weird is that Deku did live out his dream. He
Right.
defeated the most powerful villain of all time. And then after that, he became a teacher. Like, so it's like he got both. But yeah, okay, there is something he would prefer to be doing. But that doesn't mean that there's
Right.
no value to the life he's living. Like, I don't know anybody, personally speaking. I know people who people have said, "Oh, I know people," but I don't know anyone personally who is living their dream. I am not.
Nope.
But
I
I'm
am not
also
either.
not depressed. Yeah, I'm also not depressed, right?
I'm
Like, not even
depressed.
remotely. It reminds me, actually, there's a great line in the movie Soul, which was a Pixar movie, where he learns that this one. I know, but he learns that this one guy is in the movie is, and my computer may die, so it's good that I'm on the phone because then at least I can keep talking. But he learns in the movie that that his barber originally like wanted to be a doctor, and he goes like, "Wow, that must be really sad for you." And he goes, "Whoa, whoa, slow your roll. I'm happy as a clam. I never said I was unhappy."
Right.
And he's like really surprised by this. He's like, "Wait, you're happy in this?" He's like, "Yeah, it's not what I originally wanted to do, but it's a good life." And this is
Right.
like I actually think this is a fairly profound point that they made that you don't normally see in kids' movies, right?
Yep.
Like, there's a genuine profundity to that line where it's like, just because you don't live the exact life you planned for yourself does not mean that you're destined for, unhappiness, right?
Right.
Like, you should not be thinking of life in that way. And I think that's part of it though, is that in shonen stories you expect the hero to just like accomplish his goals, right? Uh but the other thing too is that Deku then does accomplish his goals,
Yep.
right? He becomes a hero by the end. So what are we complaining about? It's like, oh, he was a wage cuck. Like, even if that was true, which it's not,
Right.
right? But even if it was, he's not even in his teaching job by the end of it. He's a pro hero. He did it.
Yep.
All Might makes it very clear when Deku goes, I don't know if I should accept this. He says, no, you earned it, which he did,
Yep.
because again, he defeated the most powerful villain of all time and fulfilled the destiny of One for All to defeat All for One, right? That none of the other heroes were capable of doing, but he was, right?
Yep.
So he did earn it, absolutely. And you learn that it is his friends who came together to fund the suit led by Bakugo, meaning they did not just forget about him. Right? They were actively working on helping him rejoin pro heroism.
And
So
even
I
then, like, it's implied that they're enjoying a relatively, a relative golden age. Very few villains. Most of the time, they're working on things like natural disasters. And so
yeah, the final shot is them responding to a landslide.
yep. So it's like with um, it's like even if he was a major hero, like is there another League of Villains? Is there another what was that villain group that joined up with the League of Villains? Um,
The army. I can't
yes,
remember
the
their name, but they
Liberation
were like,
Army. You know, is there
yeah,
another one going around? Like, what's going on there? Like, what is there for him to do? Did he really get it, or did he fail? You can't. How do I want to put it? Like, there's an expectation. Yeah, like you said, there's an expectation of there's an expectation of living your dream. but he is living his dream. And if even if he wasn't quote unquote living his dream, what like how can he continue to live his dream when all he's doing is doing something there's already a surplus of heroes to take care of? And even then, he's not really the best of them to take care of it. Just off the top of my head, Bakugo, Ochako, the Shadow Guy, even
Yep.
Froppy, even Mineta has more use than a guy whose ability is like super strength and speed and toughness and stuff like that. Um, like Mineta could you, like as weird as it sounds, like if a building's falling on you, if his fat butt is fast enough, and it probably isn't, he can throw his head balls and use their sticky surfaces to create, like a web to catch, something falling down on you or sliding
What a
down on you.
masterpiece character.
I
Don't
know,
you just love Mineta?
but you get what I'm saying though. Like
I do. Yep.
they're in a situation where you're more likely to face a natural disaster than um, a villain attack. The dude who can structurally reinforce a crumbling building is more useful than the guy with a little bit more super strength than some of the other guys who also have super strength, including a guy who is diabetic and that's his superpower.
Yes. Uh, no, I get what you're saying, but the point, like, here's what I'm getting at. What do you think of them giving him the suit at the ending? Personally, I don't have an issue with it. All it is, it's just a sop to, like,
Mm,
Deku is getting rewarded for the work that he did, right? His dream was to be a hero. He fulfilled his duty and is now living the life of a mentor. But they're
mm-hmm.
saying, you get to be rewarded for the work that you did. Like, it's not just going to be like, it's not time for you yet to go off into the sunset. We're
Yep.
going to give you what you want because you've earned it with your work. Like,
Yep.
that's it.
And
So this
it's
is the other reason where it's so weird for me to see people going like Deku was a failure. It's like even if everything you're saying was true, this was an 8-year stretch. I get you're all
yes.
children, but I can assure you that 8 years is really not that long.
Yeah. And again, it's like you're absolutely right. It's a reward, but fundamentally it doesn't matter that much. It is a sop for the people who read it, yes, but it's also, and more importantly, a way to have an awesome splash image at the end of the comic that should be
Yeah, it's
pretty
for people who
satisfying.
were there were a bunch of fans who were like it's weird to me because I thought this is why my original thought when I read the ending is, oh, I think it resolved a lot of issues that fans were worried about.
Mm-hmm.
Because my main thing was that people were afraid that Deku was going to be without powers, and they were disappointed because they're like, well, after all the work he put in, I wish he did. I personally wouldn't have minded if he ended with no powers because I think it was set up.
Mm-hmm.
But I can understand why people would have been disappointed because it's just like, oh, he was working the whole series on this and he's just going to not be able to live his dream. And I was like, oh, okay, so Horikoshi resolved that point, right? He is going to live his dream. His friends have worked together and they have given him the reward that he earned with his sacrifice and hard work. And it's very wholesome because it's the friends who came together to help him with this, right? Like, what's the
Mm-hmm.
complaint about? And then everybody still was just like, no, he was cucked for 8 years. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Isn't this what you wanted? He gave you exactly what you were asking for. Like you were worried he would be without his powers, so he found a way for him to be a hero. Like, great, he did it. I don't understand. What are we complaining about at this point?
Yeah. And
Like
I
it's
think
just very odd.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to sum up this whole brouhaha. What are we even complaining about? You're either lying about the ending or you're misunderstanding how different cultural norms means. As a teacher, he's very respected and will maintain his respect even if he never does another heroic deed in his life. And even then, the climax of the story was before the last chapter, and even then, Deku earned, even if he had, lost his powers and couldn't be a teacher because UA had to close or some stupid thing like that, which wouldn't happen in the story. And even then, he would have earned his peace having because his society is in a golden age that has a surplus of heroes, which means that they're actually having trouble making ends meet as heroes, where they have to fight more natural disasters than villains, means they don't need some normal dude because they have who's apparently the best natural disaster character in the series, Mineta, there to save the day all day, every
Yeah,
day.
the
Uh,
real hero of the
the
story, Manana.
real hero. Anyway, but yeah, you get what I'm saying. Do you have anything else you want to talk about before we head out, Anthony?
Yeah, I guess the last thing I'll say is that I think a lot of the frustration over the ending was just people who were kind of upset with the rush pacing at the end of the story generally. Like I said, like the discussion of the war arc was kind of like the good, the bad, the good, the bad. You know what I mean? It's like this wasn't
Mm-hmm.
great, but this was really good. This wasn't great, but this was really good. And I
Mm-hmm.
think people were just kind of, oh, by and they were expecting the ending to be more than it ever was, right? Like it could never solve all of the pacing issues with the series. There was no way to do it except to just make the series longer, which clearly Horikoshi at this point, for some reason, was not interested in,
Yep,
right?
that's
So
absolutely right.
at this point, this ending was about as good as it could be. I have issues in that I think he should have clarified some of the relationships. That's my
Yep.
main one, right?
Yeah.
Made things a little less ambiguous. Like, for example, it would have been cool if we learned that, I don't know, this is an example, he was patrolling at night with Aizawa or something, right?
Right.
So, you know, is that strictly necessary, though? No. As
Nope.
far as endings go, it is fine. It accomplished everything that it had to sum up My Hero Academia. As far as My Hero Academia as a whole, this is my final stance on the story. I, in a large way, I didn't grow up with it because I was an adult when it came out, but I followed it from very early on, and I was a fan of it for a long time. It means a lot to me, right? I really
Mm-hmm.
like the story. I like the characters. I think Horikoshi was really good with them at times. I don't think the story was ever bad. I think at worst it was like in the C tier, and that's at its worst moments. Like even the Stars and Stripes fight, which is in some ways the worst fight in the series, I actually didn't dislike as much as other people, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
It was
but
certainly a
at its
spectacle.
best, yes, at its best, it was A plus tier and arguably S tier. Things like All Might versus All for One, Deku versus Muscular, Deku Todoroki, the Stain fight, and especially several moments in the war arc were all absolutely outstanding.
I
Right?
actually
Like
really
truly
enjoyed the
terrific
fight with
storytelling.
Gentle.
The Gentle fight was also really excellent.
Yeah.
Uh, you're right. Like all absolutely outstanding. So I think when people look back on My Hero Academia, it's gonna be remembered as a classic, right? It's gonna be like in the tier of like Yu Yu Hakusho,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not perfect, definitely flawed, you know, but people will remember it very fondly, and I think age is going to be kind to it. That's my final thought.
Yep. And I completely agree with everything. With that, I think that nothing would have been harmed by setting up Deku and Ochako more firmly, I guess we'll say.
Explicitly. Yeah.
Uh, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Uh, I wish I could say more about that, but you've said everything. I do look forward to what this author does in the future. I don't think it'll be as
Yeah.
good as MHA, but quite frankly, he like Deku, he's earned his laurels. Um, and I
Yes.
hope he takes a year off and just kind of comes back to it strong with a new piece. Uh, Shonen Jump in general seems to be let me pull this up real quick. Seems to be pretty strong. So with even with MHA leaving, we have things like Kagurabachi and One Piece still around, and even some lesser known things like Kyokuto Necromance, if that doesn't end in a couple weeks. And what's the other one? Maybe they skipped a week. And their weekly during the week. Hello, Lavender. Hello, HJC. Sadly, we're closing up. Shiba Inu Rooms and Chainsaw Man and Dan to Dan have got a lot of strong stuff in there that I think people will really enjoy. At no point are we, suffering from good stuff to read, and I look forward to whatever manga replaces it. Thank you to those who are joining us, and thank you to those who just came in. I really hope you do read back and listen to what we have to say, because we do go over the issue in every angle. And thank you for listening.